Hello and welcome everyone to another episode of Advanced React WooCommerce Theme Development with WooCommerce REST API. In the previous video, we started developing the single post page, and I showed it to you that we are going to be using the WordPress REST API, and this is going to be a custom REST API endpoint that is available through the plugin Headless CMS. So make sure you have the latest version of this. And I showed it to you that at this endpoint, you'll be able to get all the posts and the number of posts, like how many posts were found, how many pages are going to be built and all of that. Okay, and we use this so that we can build our blog page. So we'll continue further. We'll use this endpoint. So we'll go ahead and build that. So under endpoints. So we're just going to pull that up from top. Let's see, endpoint. And you can see that it's imported that on top. I'm just going to cut this and paste it up top. Okay, so this function basically uses XCOs. So you have to pull the XCOs also, right? And this is your on top. So XCOs.get uses the get post endpoint, which is this endpoint, REST API endpoint, and says page number. So you can pass a query parameter called page number, and then you can get page number 1, 2, 3, and so on and so forth. So if I try to get, let's say, these are how many pages? 12 pages. If I try to get the 12th page, you'll notice that we only get one post over here because there are like 100 posts. You divide that, and when you do the calculation, you see that the 12th page will only have one post. Okay. Continuing with this, and otherwise it's just 10 posts per page. Sorry, 9 posts. It's just 9 posts per page. If you check page number 1, you'll have 9 posts for that page. Okay, so you make that request, you get the response. If the status is 200, as you can see, the status over here is actually 200. So if the status is 200, you return the response. Otherwise, if it's not, you just return the error message, and post data will be empty. And in case if there's any error, you just return the post data empty and whatever the error message is. So that's what happens over here in the get post function, which is the async await function. So we go over here, we call this function get post. We have to pull it on top. So we'll just say post, and it has pulled that on the top over here like that. Okay. Next thing we do is we loop through these post data. So whatever post data we have received, which is this one right here, we loop through it, and then we get post for each of the iterations. So you get individual post for each iteration, and then from that we're going to pull the slug. So you can see that this is a slug. If this is a consular, that's your slug. So we get the slug, and then we build the paths data. So if you remember when I showed you how to build the product slug page, we're going to need to build the paths data, and we need to return the paths inside of the getStaticPaths function for it to be able to build these static paths. I'm not going to take time to explain that all over again. If you haven't watched that, Slug video for the product, you can go ahead and watch that. But continuing further, we have to import isEmpty also from Lodash. So it's pull that on the top over here. And then as long as it's not empty, we'll push the paths data into this empty array. So initially it'll be empty, and then for each iteration, we'll just keep pushing the params. Params will have slug, and inside of that, we'll pass the slug for each iteration. So for the first post, this will be the slug. For the second post, this will be the slug, and so on and so forth for each post. Okay, I'll show you this paths data in a moment when we run it, but just letting you know that we're building that and we're just passing it here. Then we also need a fallback, and we're going to go ahead and use a constant for this. So let's create a constant and go back to my pull request, and I'm going to look for fallback, and I'm going to go to the utils. Inside of utils, we'll create a file called slug.js, and we'll just paste that there. Now, what is fallback blocking? Let's take a look. Okay, so fallback blocking means that the new paths not returned by the getStaticPaths will wait for the HTML to be generated, identical to the server-side rendering, hence why it's called blocking. And then the cached and then be the cache for the future requests, so it happens once per path. Okay, so you can come over here on Next.js, you can read more about it, but to sum it all, what we really want is that in case if the fallback, which is actually blocking, if we are setting the getStaticPaths return object fallback value to blocking, and why we're setting it to blocking, so that the new path which is not returned by the getStaticPath. So let's say that, as I just explained to you, let's say you have like 1 lakh post, but you don't want to be generating all of the post at the time of build, because it'll take a really long time, right? So you generate 50 posts, and if the user lands onto a slug which is not the part of the 50 posts, let's say 50 posts that you've generated using this slug, then in that case it's going to wait. It's not going to give you 404. Ideally should give you 404 because that path is not available. You've not generated at the build time, so it's not available in the static folder. So it's not going to do that. It's not going to fail. It's going to make a request. How is going to make a request? It's going to come over here and it's going to make a request from here. So we still have to add the get post function here, but ideally it'll make a request from here. And this slug that you're building, that slug is going to be available to this function, right? getStaticProps. So we know that getStaticProps, whatever you return from here is available to your post function, your component, right? So it's going to grab that slug, which is not been pre-built at the time of build, and then it's going to go ahead and make a request to your WordPress server, get the data using the REST API, and then put that in the cache. Okay, and for that, if you come over here, we have to use the fallback. Okay, so I'm going to copy this and I'll show you what it means, and I'm going to paste that here. Okay, so while it's okay, let me just pull this router, use router, let's pull that on the top, and then let's also pull the fallback. Let's pull that on the top. Okay, so let's put that there. Okay, while it's making a request, so we're supposed to make a request here. We haven't done that, but we will do that in a moment. Okay, while it's making a request, getting the data for that particular post with that slug, which is not already available in the cache because we didn't build it. We only built 50 posts. The rest of them is not been built. Until that request is being made, we need to let the user know that something is happening. It shouldn't be failing, right? So that's why we use this router isFallback. Okay, so if the page is not yet generated, this will be displayed initially until the getStaticProps finishes running. Okay, so getStaticProp is going to, which is basically this function, is going to make a call to your WordPress using the WordPress REST API to your WordPress server, get the data for the post, and then return it, and then pass it here. And while it's making a request, you're going to show loading. I mean, you can show whatever you want. You can return even a component over here, like fancy loading and all that. But yeah, that's exactly what happens. Okay, so I hope you understand why we're using a fallback, why we are setting its value to blocking. We are putting it a constant so that tomorrow, if you want to change it or something, we can just have to change it at one place rather than changing it at multiple places. Okay, great. So that's what happens basically there. Okay. And now let's make a request over here. Let's grab that slug and make a request here in such scenarios. Let's say that it is not available in the 50 posts that you were pulling. Okay, so let's see. In our case, I think we are not pulling 50 posts. We are actually pulling how many? 9 posts at a time. Yeah, so we're just pulling 9 posts. So the rest of them is going to just make a real-time request and then put that in the cache. Okay, so let's do that. Go over here and copy this to get the post data. Okay, so inside of getStaticProps, below this header footer, I'm going to do that. And then we go to, of course, create a get post function. So let's do that. So get post, here we go. This is your get post function, and I'm going to paste that inside of the blog.js under utils. And I'm just going to put that beneath this get post. So what does this do? Well, first of all, you need a get post endpoint. Okay, so let's create that. Get post endpoint. Here it is. And where do we put that? Under endpoints, right? Okay, so let's do that. Okay. Now notice that for get post endpoint, I'm not using my custom endpoint, right? We use the custom endpoints because we needed these extra values like found post, page count, all of those things, right? But for a single post, I don't really require that. So I can use your WordPress standard REST API. So WordPress already has a standard REST API, which is this one. So I'm going to just show you that. So this is the one. And you can see this is just too much of data over here, right? We don't need that, all of that. That's why I use the custom endpoint, which only returns the things that we really need. So this is our custom endpoint. You can see it is only returning like ID, title, accept, slug, attachment, categories, meta. That's it, right? Not returning like a whole bunch of data. So that's pretty good. But since we want a single post, you can actually do something like this: slug equals, and I say hello world is the slug for the post. So if you do that, of course it will be hello world, not hello slug. So if you do that, you're going to get a single post with that slug. So you can see that you have slug hello world and you get the data for that particular post. Okay, so you can actually get that using the standard WordPress REST API, like default core WordPress REST API. Now you might be thinking, why did I not develop a custom endpoint for this one? Because like too much of data being rendered, right? Well, the reason for this is because the current REST API endpoint that I have created does not support Yoast, and we really need Yoast for that, right? I might support Yoast in the future. I do have a custom endpoint available for single post also, but for the time being, I'm just using this standard WordPress REST API, because what it does is, if you have the Yoast plugin active, it's going to automatically add this Yoast head JSON over here and the Yoast head. Okay, and this is the data that we need to build our SEO component, which goes in the head for SEO purposes, right? So I'm just taking the advantage of that, because we're not really fetching like 50 posts here. It's just a single post. So I think it's okay. But in the other scenario, we're fetching like 10 posts, and I think it's just meaningful to get only limited data. But here it's just a single post data, so I think it's fine for now. In the future, whenever I update my plugin to have a custom endpoint with a limit data, I can do that, but then I'll have to add the support for the Yoast in that, which currently isn't available. So that's why I'm using the standard WordPress REST API. Okay, so it gives us an access to the Yoast head JSON, so that way we'll be able to take advantage of that and make sure all the SEO tags are available inside of head. Okay, so that's that. Now we also want to be able to have the image, the featured image, and for that you need to just say and underscore embed. So if the moment you do that, you'll notice that you'll have the featured image available. Where would that be available? Let me show you that. So categories, Yoast, links, embed. Yeah, under embed you'll have that available. Under WP featured media. Okay, so if you go under embed, WP featured media, and then you'll see this is title, caption, you have media details available, you have media file, you have this, yeah, there you go, source URL, right? So under source URL, you have that embed, WP featured media, source URL, and you have that URL available for your image. If you open this in a new tab, there you go. You can see that the nice, lovely featured image is present here. Okay, great. So basically we have everything what we need, and that's your endpoint you're going to use. So this is a post endpoint. All we're going to do is just say post endpoint. So pull it on top. So not posts, but post endpoint. There you go. Okay, so let's pull that on top. That's great. And then slug, we already showed that to you. Slug hello world, and then and underscore embed, and that's what we put because we want the featured image. Okay. Then similar to get posts, we're also doing if the status equals 200 res.status, then we just return the res.data, and in case if it isn't, then just return an empty array. We catch in case if there is any error messages and return an empty array in that case. So that's your get post endpoint. So you just have to go over here. We just have to go over here and just update that. So we'll say get post, and we pull that up on top. So you can see that it's pulled the get post for you. Okay, so inside of the getStaticProps, we have the post data available, and we just need to pass that here. Okay, so we'll say post data equals post data. Otherwise, it'll just be an empty object. Okay, right, there you go. So post data, that, or empty object. So it actually gives us an array and we get the first item. That's how you get the post data for that single post. And in the params.slug, we'll actually have the slug for that page. So when, let's say user is accessing hello world /hello world, okay, they go to the URL, say localhost or whatever your example.com. Let's say this was your root URL or whatever it is, like example.com /hello world, right? So because let's say this was the post that was not built using getStaticPaths, right? It's not there in cat, so it's gonna go say, okay, you're giving me this slug, which is this, fine, I'll take that. I'll make a request using getPost. Okay, I'm gonna call this endpoint, I'm gonna get the data, and I'm gonna return that. Once it returns it, it's gonna come over here. Of course, while it's making that request, loading will show. And then once it's available, it's just gonna pass that to post data, and then using that post data, we can pass it here and then build our stuff, right? So let's do that. So now if you go back to your pull request, I'm going to copy this and then I'll explain to you. Okay, so notice that, okay, so we'll have to pull the image. Let's say pull the image, pull the, okay, post meta is not built yet, so I'll pull that in a moment. Sanitize function, pull that. Okay, we'll come to the rest. Let's update the SEO. Okay, so notice that in the response, in this response that we have for a post, we have something called Yoast head JSON, and that's what we need to pass it to our SEO component. If you haven't watched my SEO video, please watch that. You will get to know more about how we're actually passing the SEO data to our component and how it's building that in the head tag. Okay, so I'll paste that here because post data dot Yoast head JSON has the access to all of these meta values, which is this guy. Okay, so I'm just passing that SEO, and a layout will already take care of the rest. Okay, so I passed that takes care of that. Then we already have our image component. So we have a div, we have a figure tag. Inside of that, we have an image component. And as I already explained to you earlier, that our image is available under WP featured media under source URL. So that I already showed you over here, right? Under source URL, this one. So that we are accessing that using post data. We're accessing the title. So title is available title.rendered. That's your title. And then we're passing the width, height, layout, fill, some classes. And then ignore this one for a moment. I'll come back to that. And then you have the heading, which is post data.title.rendered. And then the content, post data.content.rendered. Okay, so you're passing that, sanitizing it, and putting that inside of a content. Then you also need the post meta. So what do we need? We need the date, we need the author name. So you can see that date is available here, but it's in this format. So we need to convert this, right? So we need to create a function for that. So let's do that. So go back to the PR, look for this function, copy it. It goes in the miscellaneous under utils. Miscellaneous, I'm gonna put that function there. Okay, and what it's doing, so get format date is going to take the date, whatever date you pass. So in our case, we are passing this format date, right? I'll take that, and then I'll use the new date function, pass that value, and then it'll call the function called toLocalDateString. It takes locales, it takes what are the different options. Weekday, you want a long format. Year, you want numeric. Month, you want short. Day, you want numeric. You put all that option here, and then it's going to return the formatted date. Okay, so that's what we need. So let's go back here. I'm going to pull this function. So now it's pulled that on top. Get formatted date. Great. Okay, that's that. And then we have to build this component called post meta because I want to be able to show the date and who wrote this post. So let's do that. So I'll go to components, create a directory called post meta, and inside of that we'll create a JavaScript file called index.js, and I'll look for this particular component in my pull request. Imagine if I had to type all that, how much time it's going to take to actually make such videos. It's going to take like hours and hours. That's why I'm doing copy pasting, because it saves time. And I could type, but imagine the amount of time it'll take. So I'm going step by step. I hope it's getting clear to you in your head. But yeah, I hope it's not too complicated. Post meta. So this is the component. I'm going to copy that and post meta. All right. So what's happening here? Let's see. So you have post meta. It takes date, author name, just a standard div, time, and it passes the date. And then inside of another span, it passes the author name, okay, by the author. So that's all that happens here. It just returns this div with and passing the information here with a bunch of class name for styling. Cool. So all we have to do is just pull it. So I'll just say post meta, and let's pull that on top over here. Okay, so now we have that component as well. So there you go. So all good. Excellent. Let's see if we've missed anything. I think all good so far. Okay, one more thing we need to do is we created this blog index.js, but there's no component in here. So let's just put a component for the time being, return blog, and then export default blog. I'm also going to show you by consoling out this post data, and then I'm also going to, let's actually show you this getStaticPath. So I'm going to show you this paths data, how it's building that. Okay, I'll do console log paths data, and then I'm going to say see what it's actually building. All right. So in each of the loop you'll have some slug. So just console out the slug over here. Okay, and also you need to pull this params, because this params we have to pull it from here. In getStaticProps we'll have the params available. Okay, so that param will have the slug available. So now we'll just build it. Say npm run build and npm run start. Okay, so there you go. So now just a small update. We just check if this is not empty and it is an array, then we go ahead and map through. Console out the post data that we receive from the get posts, and console out the paths data, and console out the slug. Okay, now I'm going to run npm run dev here, and then I'm going to go to one of the posts from WordPress. So I'll say blog/hello world, because if you notice, that's the URL that we're trying to achieve. So under pages we have blog / whatever the slug of that post is. So we have a post on WordPress called hello world. If you check all posts, and we have hello world, this one right here. I read the post. It says welcome to WordPress. So that's what we're trying to achieve. If I hit it, and if you check, you'll see that for post data, so this StaticPaths has run. We got the post data because we made a query to the REST API endpoint and got all the posts, basically just 9 of them. And then we loop through the post data, which is this guy right here. And each iteration we got the slug. Like you can see, slug is different in each iteration. And then we build the params. We kept pushing the params to the paths data because we want to build all the path for the posts. And then if you check, it did console out paths in each iteration, right? 9 of them here, total 9, because we pulled 9 posts. And then you also have the paths data being returned. So you can see that how this paths data is being rendered. So finally in this array, you can see that it's got all of the data for all the 9 slugs. Okay, so we said params, which is params and then we said slug. So you have the slug, and then the value of that slug in each iteration is different, right? So it's build that array. It's going to generate that many pages on the build time. And it did that, getStaticPaths. And then I'm just going to remove all of that for a moment. And then, so over here, we have the data available. So we have the post data, Yoast head JSON. So I already showed that to you, that we have the Yoast head JSON. We have the source URL, we have the title rendered, we have all of that information. So now if you go back on the front end, you can see you've got all of that information. So now if you console out the post data, you'll see what we get. So I'm going to do it. So you'll see that you have the data available, right? You have the post data, you have the Yoast JSON right here. Okay, you've got all of that information that's being passed for the Yoast SEO. And if you check under the head, you've got all the Yoast Twitter site, OG URL, OG description, all of those things, right? Including the image. Then under post data, embed WP featured media, embed WP featured media. First one, we have the source URL. Also be sure to pull the image from your own image component and not next image. So I'll just say import image from source components image, like that. Okay. So now if you refresh, you can see there's an image, but it's not showing. And the reason for that is because this class doesn't exist. So we'll have to go and update our Tailwind CSS custom properties. And we need to add a height there. So after line height, you can put height, and we'll say 600 pixels equals 600 pixels. Okay, like that. So we're just setting that so we can use this class. And then now if you rerun, just rerun npm run dev, wait for it to do its thing. And in meanwhile, we can start removing our console logs. We don't need this console log. We can remove, we can keep this one actually. And we don't have any other console logs, so that's great. Okay, there you go, congratulations. So you have the image. So we just added that class right here, edge 600. So it gave us the height 600. If you notice the image is a little blurred, is because I'm using a smaller size image. I've uploaded a smaller size image, so make sure you upload a large size image, full size image, and the rest of it will be taken care by Next.js anyways, because you can see you have a source set at different screen size. It renders different sizes of images. So you just upload the biggest image, like above 2000 pixels in terms of width, but Next.js will take care of the rest in terms of optimization from the backend. Okay, so you have your date here, you have the author name, you have the title, and you have the content as well, which I already explained to you how you're rendering all of that stuff here. Excellent. So I hope you did like the video. If you did, please give a thumbs up and do subscribe to my channel if you aren't already. And do star my repository to support my work. It's Nextjs WooCommerce REST API, thanks to 201 people already. And do give super thanks to support my work, and join the membership for more perks. I'm going to see you in the next video. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.